Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. A very special episode. One, because it's Monday and I don't normally release on Mondays, but this is the beginning of what I'm calling workshop week. And also you'll notice it's Thanksgiving week. And it's a time of year where I think all moms, but especially special needs moms, need extra support. And so that's why I've ramped up the agenda for this week, giving you easy, actionable, insightful episodes that you can apply immediately to make shifts in your life. I'm really excited about it. And it is kind of a ramping up towards what I'm doing in basically November and all of December, and what I'm calling the unchallenge. You'll have heard about, doing a boot camp or challenge or kind of adding some extra things to your life that you don't normally do. And that's why I'm calling this the unchallenge, is because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I don't need anything extra added to my life, to the juggling plates of, all that happens during this season. And really, I think the conversation that I want to have is how to actually bring some joy for you, some enjoyment back into your holiday season. I think it was so telling when I pulled my audience over on Instagram. I said, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think about holiday season? And it was sad. And it was familiar because I understand it. And it was stress. My favorite one was, whoa. That was a good one. And they were not words of merriment, joy, the most wonderful time of the year. And I'm here to disrupt that story. That's what this week is about, and that's what the Unchallenge is about. And so the link to join the Unchallenge, it's free. And so it's going to be really, really simple because we're not adding a lot to our lives, but the idea here, the design behind it is actually giving you ways to step out of the overwhelm and into some of what you want, whether that's calm, whether it might be a little bit of joy, whether it's just not feeling so stressed out. So that's what it's designed for. And you're going to be in a community with other moms doing the same thing, which is how we were designed to be. So come over. I was going to say the link is in the episode show notes. And to find the episode show notes, what you'll do is you'll click on the episode, and there's usually like a little 3-dot button to expand, or you even sometimes can scroll up to find the episode show notes. If you have any questions, DM me. Okay. So the link will be there to sign up. All you have to do is give me your email, and then you will magically be included. Let's talk about today's episode. Today's episode is really kind of an overview of what I call the path to peace. It's going to give you the gift of knowing where you are so that you can know where you're going. In the work that I do in the corporate world and coaching, what's so fascinating is there's so many people that jump in to try to fix something before they have any idea what the actual problem is. And so they end up really, really focusing on, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this problem? Yet there's actually, the biggest gap is actually knowing what the problem is. Okay, so let's actually apply that to our lives as special needs moms. As I mentioned, this is what I call a pathway. And one of the biggest losses that we have as moms of children with disabilities and medical complexities is that we have lost what we thought our future would be as a mom. When we went out to have a child, we thought we knew what we were getting into, and we were clearly wrong. Due to the unpredictability of your child's needs and future, we feel like we can't find our footing again. We feel dependent on knowing that to be able to find our own footing. And that's not necessarily the case. So today I'm going to describe what I call the path to peace process. The idea here is really I want you to identify where you're at on this path. The better you can identify where you're at, the better you can identify what's next for you, the steps. And I'm going to give you insight to what those might be. Okay, let's look at the 5 stages. And I want to make a note here that it's not a linear, that word's hard for me. It's not a linear process. We don't neatly move from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. It's more like Candyland. I just came up with that. That's good. More like Candyland, where you move along the path, but then, man, that dreaded peanut comes. And that peanut, you thought you were about to the rainbow. That peanut brings you all the way back to the beginning. And that's how this path works. So it does progress, but it also, I would say, it's really more of a circle that we're always cycling through as you'll see. Okay. So the first step of this process is what I call the stunned survival. This is when you first got a diagnosis. This is when you've really learned about what your child is facing. This is when perhaps you started your child's life in the NICU. During this stage, the focus is really on the essentials. It truly is survival. The focus is just learning and absorbing basically a new language as you understand what your child is dealing with. And it's really when the community rallies around you. So oftentimes you'll be accepting support from community. You will just be receiving out of desperation. You won't even be asking, people will be offering. And you're definitely not thinking about the future because you're literally just surviving. So in this stage, a lot of the emotions that start to come awake later on are shut down. You're kind of in fight, flight, freeze. You are just, again, the key word here is surviving. And so then you're going to transition in, start making some adjustments to what we'll call your new life. And, this might look like quitting your job, finding services, finding care. Maybe it's months of navigating back and forth from the hospital. Or maybe it's just really understanding what supports your child needs as they have a new stage or new diagnosis. Something to note about this stage is it's not time-based, right? It's not like, oh, after 2 months, you're out at this stage. This can be months, this can be years. And I would say my personal case, I was in stunned survival for years. In like 4 months after my son got diagnosed, it was a little longer than that. Anyhow, within the year, just a few months after we got out of the hospital for my son's first diagnosis, I was having a baby. Like I was already pregnant when he got diagnosed. So I think that really added to the survival, right? Because already having a baby is a thing, right? And so I really think that really expanded my length of time in this stunned survival. I think it also has to do with where you start at, right? I started very emotionally, I guess I would say, immature. I really didn't have any facility with understanding my own emotions, how I process what I needed. Like I was starting from ground zero. So that is stunned survival. Now let's move on to the next step. And my guess is you're going to start to really be like, oh yeah, like I have parts of that now. So I call this step stabilized yet self-sacrificing. So this is when we move to stable, right? We're like, okay, we have some routines developed. We have like the newness has worn off. Like you are not really doing things now for the first time. You now are kind of like, oh yeah, I got this. You're really all in for helping your child. And interestingly, by default, all out for helping yourself. Usually the thinking is there's just no time. There's no time for my child and my needs. And there's an attachment. It's like the need to help your child is the driving force here. This is the part of the self-sacrificing. It's not an intentional self-sacrificing. It's a self-sacrificing based in desperation to have things be different than they are. So I would say what yet is emerging in this stage is true acceptance of where you're at. So again, all the focus is on your child's learning, managing other children's jobs. So there's a little bit of survival still in this piece. And you'll see that there's a lot of control. Control is often driving really kind of what's trying to calm the chaos that you're now experiencing because your life has become so unpredictable. So often things that you'll notice in this stage is isolation from other people, your old community. Again, because the sole focus is on your child. So there's also, again, a neglect of self and an intense focus and isolation on the child. And as I just kind of mentioned, I think that there's a separation from your old community. No longer do they support you in the same way that they did before you became a special needs parent. And so while you still maintain those relationships, there is something missing for you in actually having your community really understand you. One of the things that often happens in this stage is a listening to others' advice, doing what they think is right. Really, there's not an ability yet to really trust your inner wisdom. It's really leaning on the inner wisdom of others. As you can imagine, this results in really a very low confidence that you got this, and really a desperation, again, seeking for what other people know and think, and really kind of guiding you. There starts to be an assumption in this stage that this is going to be how your life is forever. And so, as you can imagine, as we go into the next stage is really kind of, I would call it a rebelling back from the stage. And before we move on to the next stage, the last thing I'll add on this stabilized yet self-sacrificing is that because you're neglecting yourself, you'll notice things like exploding or yelling, or just feeling anger, but not having any space for it. So really kind of just pushing down and pushing away. And that's why we see explosions and yelling, is because there's really no space for your humanity and what you need. Okay, now let's move on to step 3. Phase 3 is really a better way of saying it. And I call this alone and afraid. Clearly the title indicates this is where you start to just feel really alone. That you're really clear that my old community doesn't get it. And you start to wonder, is there anybody out there that actually can help or does understand? And the key thing here is in this stage is when you go out and look for it. Interestingly enough, kind of by default, by you being here on this podcast, by you listening, it indicates that in some parts of your life, you're actually in step 3, right? Because you've wondered, how can I help myself? What do I need here? And so you've looked for it. Part of this stage also is having the experience of looking like you're very alive on the outside. You know, other people that don't maybe really understand your intimate inner life would say, yeah, she's doing great. She's a rock star. Oh my gosh, you're so strong. I don't know how you do it. And what they don't realize is that you feel hollow on the inside, that you are so distinctly clear that there is something missing, even though you're functioning at what we would call a high level. In this stage, you've kind of become even more professional at taking care of and doing the things for your child. Although it still feels very chaotic because you haven't really stepped into like the leadership level of managing your home, your therapist. And so it feels very much like everything externally is running you. So your child's demands are still running you. And of course, you're managing everything around you. One of the key parts of this stage is starting to feel kind of despair, because not necessarily because of your child's situation at this point. It really starts to shift because the despair is that the fear is that you'll be stuck in this stage for the rest of your life. Because at this stage, there's no ability to look ahead, to dream, to plan your future. That's all been lost. And it hasn't yet been rebuilt. So this is when in this stage 3 is that really becomes to start kind of shouting at you that you have this desire, but you don't yet have a vision. I would say also this step is you're exhausted. Like you have been running solid. You got hit with this whatever thing, and you have stepped up to the plate. You have run and you have run and you have run, and you haven't built effective coping skills. And so what you're going to notice is a lot of emotions coming back online during this stage, but an inability and unfamiliarity on really how to process these big emotions. You might have tried therapy or considered trying it, but it really didn't help in the ways that you wanted to. It certainly probably helped in some ways, but there's still something that you're looking for. In this stage, it's common to start to develop a lot of self-critique and self-judgment. You start to wonder if there's something that you're doing wrong or missing that has you feeling this way. And so there starts to be an unkindness and a lack of compassion for yourself, in addition to feeling very exhausted. Likely, there's a lot of hopelessness. Another key indicator that you are in this stage is that you're noticing a resistance to the idea that your life will be nothing more than this shell. That you're kind of like, okay, I see this and I'm not okay with this. That you're starting to really inquire and wonder what has to change because you can't go on like this. And so part of this also is finding your voice and learning to speak up. And so this is the becoming and kind of the leading to the next stage. Is part of being in stage 3 is learning to find your voice and stepping into that. And so there becomes this step forward in investing in yourself, in therapy. Maybe there's an actual effort to take care of yourself. Perhaps it's getting more respite. Perhaps you're looking at coaching and you're willing to actually change how it's going. And that means really changing the time and energy that you're spending on yourself versus your child. Okay, and as these actions, as these steps of resistance start to get louder and louder, that propels you into what I call stage 4. Calm the chaos. This stage is where the deepening of acceptance, of letting go of what was, and really accepting your child as they are now is what really, really, really brings so much calm. I'm not going to go into it now, but acceptance is a really key part of this step. In this step also, there's the practicing of processing big emotions like anger, grief, resentment, sadness. And interestingly enough, we also notice that there's a discomfort in actually experiencing positive emotions. And so there's an opening to recognize this as you open for the big emotions that are on the kind of what we call unpleasant side. There's also kind of a breaking of the ice of the other side, which we would call pleasant or maybe even desirable. This stage is where you feel like you're finding yourself again. You're reclaiming your identity of who you are, especially who you are now as the mom that you are. So you start to feel reinvigorated in your life and really start to connect to who you are, your essence and your power. So there's a noticeable shift in inner chaos. You no longer feel like life is happening to you against your will. And I want to clarify, it's not that there's not moments of that, but that this stage is when you have the ability to step out of that for a moment to gain some elevation. One of the actions that's really essential in this stage is identifying and asking for what you need. It's not the asking part, usually that's the hardest, it's the identifying. We're like, I have no idea what I need. And you can imagine how this comes to be, right? As if you deny yourself for so long in stage 1, in stage 1, in stage 2, definitely. And then still in stage 3, of course, your ears are deafened because you have literally not practiced this. One of the distinct shifts, again, in this stage is that it goes from a thinking about doing something for yourself to a doing. And this is because of the identity shift. This is because of finding yourself again and kind of identifying again as not just a mother, actually then is the thing that inspires this new action. So we see both of them happening in this step. One of the reasons this step is called Calm the Chaos is because part of those actions means really stepping into that leadership role of how you manage your life. And so this looks like really getting clear on what you will do and what you won't do, and the things that you choose for yourself and your child, and it aligns with your highest commitments. No longer is the default and only commitment supporting your child. There's actually other commitments as well that you make room for. So you see that level of leadership that's not just taking what's handed to you, but is actually being at cause and creating what you have. Another big distinction, kind of shifting from step 3 to step 4, is this relationship to self, where it really shifts from that self-critique, judgment, to a kindness and compassion. It interestingly is one of the things that actually causes the shift is when there's this softening towards self, and the absence of judgment opens up this space for you to do all the work. In Calm the Chaos stage, it's also common to see a willingness to step into some of the discomforts, such as asking for more help, as part of the currency to shifting things. Part of this stage 4 is stepping into discomfort on purpose. And one of the examples for that is asking for more help. Acknowledging that, I have some discomforts with asking for help, but I'm willing to do it because it aligns to my commitments. And one of the big shifts here also is relating to discomfort is not bad, but just something that you're not familiar with and you haven't done yet. And so as a result of stepping out into this discomfort, there's an expanded network of support in all your areas, your spiritual, emotional, physical, and of course, child-related. Also, what happens often in this step is relationships start to shift, because stepping out of kind of the mindset of it's all happening to me in stage 3, in stage 4, it's really kind of stepping into I'm creating this. So there's a big, big shift between stage 3 and stage 4. Okay, let's look at stage 5. Stage 5 is called Power, Peace, and Possibility. All amazing P words, if you ask me. So this is really when you step into being able to invest time and money in yourself, on yourself, without feeling guilty, right? So some of you might be doing that now in stage 2 or 3, but you feel guilty. And really the work of actually shifting, again, it's all identity based and all who you relate to yourself as being, and examining what actually is creating the guilt. That's work that happens in stage 4. You actually get to have the experience of not having guilt. And in this stage 5, you would relate to your life as something that you have control of. Not because you have sovereignty and you actually get to control things, but it's because you feel like you have control of who you are. It's you have a confidence of who you are. So therefore, whatever happens around you, you have the confidence to know that you are a person that can emotionally handle it. You are a person that can ask for help. You are a person that actually can go to the depths that this thing that you're facing may require of you. And so it's really interesting. That's where this peace part comes in. And I would say that there is very big connections to your spiritual connection, to what that means to really acknowledge you don't have control of everything, but to be in peace in that place. And so again, we feel like we would have control, and it's not exactly control. It's just that we don't feel so chaotic. In this stage also, there is a sense of freedom, an ability to dream, play, and enjoy your life. And you might hear this stage and you're like, does that even exist? Because here's one of the problems is that we as special needs moms have 0 examples out there in the world of women doing this. I happen to have the fortune of having a lot of people in my circle because of this podcast, because of different communities I'm involved in. And I actually just came home from a retreat where I got to actually be pushed myself in saying, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that was possible. And so when we actually step into this possibility, 1, A big, big part of this step 5 is actually really having your purpose back. And I think a lot of that purpose is actually how you serve others, your place of service on this earth, and who you will be that matters to you most. With this stage, there's also a deepening of the connection. There's a deepening of the network. There is a willingness to be vulnerable in community, and also a willingness to support others in the same level of vulnerability without having to fix them. In this stage also is where, remember how I said that this is not a lineal experience? In this stage, often there's the recognition of areas that you're perhaps in stage 1, 2, 3, or 4 in. There's an awareness and an ability to recognize when something isn't empowered, and an ability to work on that through the lens of course, curiosity, generosity, and kindness. And I think the biggest piece here is that really what's been made open is your ability to love yourself and your child unconditionally. And I know we hear that word a lot, unconditional love, but when we really learn what that feels like, what that's like for us, and I want to acknowledge, I don't know that we can do this as humans. I think that God is able to do this. However, I think when we meditate on the concept of loving somebody unconditionally, I think that deepens our love for them. And though it will be imperfect, I think it's very powerful for us to experience the level of love that we do have the capacity for. And I'll also say the level of love that we have the capacity to receive. And that can be from people, and that can be from God. And so you can see how this stage also continues to kind of grow and develop. And this stage is kind of one that goes back to all the other stages and kind of brings all the different pieces and parts of you through the stages. Those are the stages in the path to peace process. And I want to emphasize here that there's not a stage that's better than the other. You know, we could easily be like, oh, well, clearly stage 5 is the best stage. But that's not necessarily how I look at it. It's really just a way to recognize where you are. And if you're in stage 1 or 2, or you feel like you're stuck in stage 3, it's not a problem. It's just where you are. And it's just information to give you access to curiosity, to ask yourself the simple question of what's next. Okay, well, I hope what's next for you is joining the Unchallenge. One, again, it'll give you an opportunity to really kind of step into some intentionality this holiday season. And it's another way that I am creating for this community to connect with one another. Part of the Unchallenge is going to be some community meetings. And I can't tell you how amazing it is over in the Special Needs Mom podcast group over on Facebook. How amazing it is when we actually just get on Zoom face to face, have really candid, connecting conversations. It's so amazing. So basically, we're doing that on steroids for this Unchallenge, and I cannot wait to see you there. Okay, I'll see you on tomorrow's episode. So we're having an episode every day this week. And tomorrow we're talking about planning your day from intention over default, and specifically to manage overwhelm. Because, let's all raise our hands. Who gets overwhelmed easily during this season? I definitely do. So I'm going to give you very simple, very actionable information that you can apply immediately to really shift your experience with overwhelm. I'll see you tomorrow.